A pale dawn rests over a quiet valley, its light touching orchards, fields, and the roofs of a prosperous town. Birds call from fig trees, heavy with fruit. Servants move through courtyards with baskets of bread and jugs of milk. At the center of this gentle abundance lives a man whose name is remembered across centuries as a symbol of patience, Ayoub, known in other tongues as Job. His barns are full, his flocks spread over many hills, his home alive with the laughter of children and the footsteps of guests. Yet his greatest wealth is something unseen, a heart that bows willingly to its Lord in every state. This is the story of how that heart was tested, stripped, and restored until nothing remained in it but trust. Chapter 1. A Life of Quiet Generosity. Ayoub was born into the lineage of prophets, a descendant of Ibrahim through Ishaq and Esau, according to many narrations. From his youth, he carried the fragrance of that heritage, reverence for God, a deep sense of right and wrong, and a tenderness toward the weak. Over the years, Allah blessed him with land, herds, servants, and a large family. His name became known not only in his own region, but in neighboring lands as well. Wealth reveals some hearts and ruins others. In Ayoub's case, it softened him further. His orchards and flocks were not fortresses, but channels. He used them as streams through which Allah's mercy could flow to others. The poor knew his door. They found food there, clothing, and quiet respect. He freed slaves, visited the sick, and gave without belittling those who received. When guests sat at his table, he made them feel that they were honoring him by accepting his hospitality, not the other way around. Inside his home, he was known for gratitude. Every breath, every meal, every healthy child prompted remembrance of the one who had given it. He did not assume that blessings were his by right. He saw them as trusts, placed temporarily in his care. In the still hours of the night, when others slept, he bowed in prayer, whispering thanks and seeking forgiveness for any shortcoming. In the unseen world, a conversation took place. A group of angels remarked on the state of human beings, how some turned to God humbly and were raised, while others grew arrogant and fell. One of them spoke of Ayoub as a luminous example among people of the earth, praising his patience, generosity, and constant remembrance of his Lord. These words stirred the envy of Iblis, who overheard. The adversary of mankind cannot bear to see a human being respond to blessing with sincere gratitude. He contended that Ayoub's devotion was shallow, tied only to the comfort that surrounded him. Strip away the wealth, he argued, and the words of praise would dry up. Allah, who knew his servant's heart better than any, responded not with argument, but with permission. Iblis was granted limited power to test Ayoub's sincerity, with one condition. He could touch Ayoub's external circumstances, but not his inner core, his soul, his reason, his heart, where faith resided. Ayoub, going about his daily acts of kindness, did not know that the seasons of his life were about to change. The orchards still gleamed in the sun, his children still played in the courtyards. Yet the first winds of trial had already begun to blow, invisible but ordained. Chapter 2. The fall of wealth and children trials often arrive in a series, each wave larger than the last. For Ayoub, the first blow struck his possessions. Storms and strange calamities descended upon his lands. Disease swept through his animals. Thieves raided some of his herds. Accidents destroyed parts of his property. What had once seemed like an endless sea of resources shrank rapidly. Servants came to him one after another, breathless with bad news. A field had burned, a caravan had been lost, a group of camels had been swept away in a flood. Each report would have staggered an ordinary man. Iblis, concealed behind events, rubbed his hands in malicious satisfaction. He took on the guise of an old sorrowful visitor and presented himself before Ayoub. With a voice dripping false sympathy, he spoke of the devastation. He suggested that perhaps all this loss proved that Ayoub's worship had been wasted, that God, if truly powerful and pleased, would have protected his wealth. He hinted that others were saying Ayoub's generosity had been foolish, leaving him vulnerable now. Ayoub listened, grief stirring naturally at the mention of ruined lands and lost animals. But sorrow did not wash away his clarity. He answered that everything taken from him had been a trust in the first place. The one who gives has the right to take whenever he wills. He had enjoyed these blessings for years. Now he would bow with empty hands as he had bowed with full ones. He returned to prayer. The floors of his house still knew the touch of his forehead in prostration. The tone of his voice may have carried new pain, but the direction of his gratitude did not change. Iblis was thwarted. Wealth had fallen away like leaves in autumn, yet Ayoub's devotion remained green. So the adversary advanced his argument. He claimed before Allah that Ayoub only held his tongue because he still had his children, a father's deepest attachment. Strike that bond, he said, and Ayoub's submission would fracture. Again, permission was granted within limits. Soon after, tragedy visited Ayoub's family. In one narration, his children had gathered under a roof when a violent wind shook the structure. It collapsed, burying them. In another, a series of disasters took their lives in quick succession. Whichever the details, the outcome was the same. The house that had once echoed with youthful voices fell into a silence heavy as stone. Iblis returned, cloaked once more in the form of a messenger. He described the heartbreaking scene, the dust, the stillness, the lifeless bodies. Then he insinuated his poison. If Ayoub's Lord were truly merciful, would he not have shielded these innocent lives? Was this not a betrayal of all the nights Ayoub had spent in prayer? The loss cut Ayoub to the core. Any parent who has lost even one child knows the hollow ache it leaves behind. Ayoub lost many in one sweep. Tears came, unashamed and unrestrained. Yet even in that most human of griefs, his understanding of who his children belonged to did not waver. He answered that Allah sometimes gives and sometimes withholds, sometimes pleases and sometimes tests. Children, like wealth, are trusts. Their sudden return to their Creator was a decree he could not fully grasp, but he would not respond with rebellion. Once more, he bowed. Perhaps his body shook more than before. Perhaps his voice broke when he whispered God's names. But the direction of his turning did not change. Iblis retreated, confounded. Twice he had struck, and twice he had found that Ayoub's worship was rooted not in comfort, but in conviction. There remained one more angle of assault: the body itself. Chapter 3. A body reduced, a faith intact. Iblis argued that as long as Ayoub's health remained intact, hope would sustain his worship. A man might lose wealth and children, he suggested, but cling to the strength of his limbs and the clarity of his senses. Let those be taken, and gratitude would crumble. Allah allowed a further trial, again with a limit. Iblis could afflict Ayoub's body, but not his soul, his mind, or his heart. That inner sanctuary would remain out of reach. Illness descended upon Ayoub like a slow, relentless tide. His skin changed, his muscles wasted, his limbs grew weak. Pain visited his joints and bones. Tasks he once performed with ease required effort, then assistance, then became impossible. The man who had strode through fields inspecting flocks could no longer stand for long without support. People's reactions shifted as his appearance changed. At first, friends came to visit, bringing food and sympathy. As his sickness lingered, their visits grew less frequent. Whispers spread, some driven by fear of contagion, others by shallow theology. Some wondered what great sin he must have committed to be struck so severely. Others simply recoiled from the sight of suffering they did not know how to face. Eventually, many abandoned him. Doors that had once opened readily closed when his name was mentioned. The man who had been a pillar of support to others found himself largely alone, laid low on a simple bed. Only one figure remained constant: his wife. She had known him in days of strength and honor. She refused to abandon him in weakness. She cleaned his wounds, fed him, comforted him when pain racked his body. When they had nothing, she worked outside the home to earn small amounts of food. Her hair silvered, her hands roughened. Yet her loyalty stayed firm until years of hardship began at last to wear on her spirit as well. Through all of this, Ayoub's tongue continued to move in remembrance. His heart, though housed in a failing body, pulsed with the same trust it had held in times of ease. He did not ask, "Why me?" He asked instead for the strength to bear what had been decreed and for forgiveness if his patience faltered. Ibn Asakir relates that every part of his body was afflicted except his heart and his tongue, and with these two he never stopped glorifying Allah. The disease lasted so long that people grew weary even of speaking his name. Yet in the unseen register, each moment of patient endurance inscribed another line of honor beside it. Iblis, watching this spectacle of unwavering faith, grew frustrated. His usual arsenal, loss, pain, social rejection, had not broken Ayoub. He turned his cunning toward the one helper still beside him, the devoted wife, whose love he hoped to twist into pressure. Chapter 4. A wife's plea and a prophet's prayer. Iblis came to Ayoub's wife in the guise of a concerned stranger. He asked her gently about her husband's condition and listened as she described the years of illness, the poverty, the isolation. He reminded her of what Ayoub had once been: strong, respected, surrounded by children, overflowing with wealth. Then he contrasted that with what she saw now, a frail figure lying on a mat between life and death. "Has your Lord treated him well?" he implied. "Is this the reward for decades of worship and charity?" The questions did not have to be stated clearly. They were woven into the rhythm of his sympathy. The woman's heart, heavy with fatigue and grief, trembled. She had held herself together for so long, but the dam finally cracked. Coming to Ayoub, she voiced what she had until then suppressed. "How long will you endure this?" she asked through tears. "Why not call upon your Lord to lift this pain? Must we live without wealth, without children, without health forever?" Her words pierced him more sharply than any earlier insult. Not because she had spoken of relief. In Islam, asking Allah to remove hardship is itself an act of worship, but because beneath her plea he heard the whisper of doubt planted by Iblis. With compassion yet firm clarity, Ayoub asked her how many years they had lived in health and plenty. She answered that it had been many decades, far more than a lifetime's usual share. Then he asked how long this suffering had lasted. She told him the number. It was a fraction of the years of ease. Then he replied gently, "How can I feel ashamed to be patient with my Lord for a time shorter than the years he allowed me to enjoy his favors?" He understood that gratitude for long seasons of blessing made patience during shorter seasons of trial not only possible, but fitting. Still, he recognized that her faith had slipped in that moment under the weight of sorrow. In a state of wounded resolve, he swore that if he ever regained health, he would strike her with 100 blows, a harsh oath born not of cruelty, but of shock at seeing the last fortress of support shaken. Yet even as he swore, he later regretted the words, though he remained bound by them. After this conversation, he asked her to leave him alone for a time, lest further whispers weaken her. She departed, broken-hearted, seeking work to survive. Left alone with his pain and his Lord, Ayoub turned his face fully to the one he had never ceased to trust. He did not frame his supplication as a complaint against the divine decree. Instead, he simply presented his state, that harm had touched him and that his Lord was the most merciful of those who show mercy. In that concise turning lay the essence of his character. He named his distress, but defined Allah only by mercy, not by blame. Allah answered. After years in which the illness had only worsened, a command came in his heart to strike the ground with his foot. When he did, a spring of water gushed forth at his feet. He was instructed to wash in it and to drink from it. As the cool water flowed over his skin and into his body, the disease began to recede as if it had never been. Flesh filled out gaunt limbs, color returned to his cheeks, strength flowed back into his muscles. By the time his wife returned, bracing herself to see again the familiar sight of her suffering husband, she instead saw a stranger, a healthy, handsome man standing strong. Confused, she asked him whether he had seen the sick prophet who used to lie here. He smiled and told her gently that he was that very man, restored by the mercy of Allah. The reunion filled their home with tears of joy. Every scar of hardship was now crowned with visible healing. Yet one unresolved matter remained, Ayoub's oath. He wanted neither to harm his wife nor to break a promise made in God's name. Allah, who knew the tenderness in his heart, provided a way out. Ayoub was instructed to gather a bundle of thin grass containing 100 blades and strike her once with it. In this way, the letter of his oath would be fulfilled without inflicting real pain. Thus, Allah honored both his truthfulness and his compassion. Chapter 5. Blessings returned, lessons revealed. Restoration did not stop at Ayoub's body. Allah returned to him his family, either by bringing his children back to life or by giving him new offspring to fill his home with laughter once more. Narrations differ in detail, but all agree that his lineage flourished again. His wealth too returned, perhaps even multiplied. Flocks once lost were replaced. Fields bloomed again. Servants filled the courtyards. One vivid narration preserved in Hadith describes Ayoub standing naked under the sky, bathing after his recovery. A cloud passed overhead and rained down upon him a shower of golden locusts, small pieces of wealth pouring from heaven. He began to gather them eagerly into his garment. His Lord's voice called to him, asking whether he had not already enriched him sufficiently. Ayoub answered, with the honesty of a devoted servant, that he was indeed content, but that he could never turn away from God's blessings when they descended. His response captured the balance in his character, complete satisfaction with Allah's decree, yet willingness to accept further favor as another opportunity for gratitude and charity. Those who had shunned him in illness now saw him restored. Some came in shame, some in curiosity. Ayoub welcomed them without bitterness. He remembered all too keenly what it felt like to be deserted. He would not imitate their earlier behavior. His house, once again, became a place where the poor found help and travelers found rest. In gatherings of angels, his name was now mentioned not only as an example of gratitude and ease, but as a paragon of patience in affliction. Allah testified to his excellence, praising him as a servant who remained constantly turning back to his Lord. For his wife, the years of hardship became a crown invisible but honored in the heavens. Her loyalty through dark days, despite moments of weakness, was part of the story of Ayoub's patience. Trials rarely shape only one soul. They carve entire relationships. Ayoub himself did not emerge from his ordeal unchanged. Before, he had known Allah through blessing. Now, he knew him through loss and restoration. Before, he had spoken of God's mercy looking out over healthy children and golden fields. Now, he spoke from the experience of having lain on the edge of death, having had every worldly support removed, and still finding that the hand holding him up had never let go. To those who asked him about the meaning of his journey, he could now say, not in theory, but from lived truth, that worldly gifts are not signs of divine favor in themselves, nor is their loss proof of wrath. What matters is the heart's posture, gratitude when given, trust when withheld, and turning back to the giver in both states. Chapter 6. The Echo of Ayoub in Every Heart. The story of Ayoub does not fill pages with complex dialogues or political intrigues. It moves quietly, like the slow deepening of night before dawn. Its scenes are simple: fields, a household, a sickbed, a spring of water. Yet within those simple settings lies a drama as profound as any. Will the human heart love its Lord only as long as life is kind, or will it cling to him even when everything else is stripped away? Ayoub's life answers that question with a resounding endurance. He shows that patience is not passive resignation, but a deliberate, steady choice to hold on to trust when logic offers no easy explanation. He grieves, he feels the weight of sorrow and pain, but he refuses to translate his suffering into accusations against Allah. Instead, he directs his complaints toward the only one who can truly heal them, without letting those complaints grow into ingratitude. In every age, listeners facing their own hardships hear parts of their story in his. The one who has lost wealth hears the echo of the fallen orchards. The parent mourning a child hears the silence in Ayoub's once busy home. The patient confined to a bed hears the creak of his own bones in Ayoub's long illness. The caregiver, worn down by years of service, sees something of herself in his wife. And in Ayoub's prayer, so brief, so free of accusation, they find a model. He does not say, "Why have you done this to me?" He says, in essence, "Harm has reached me, and you are the most merciful." Between those two phrases lies everything: honest acknowledgement of pain and unwavering affirmation of God's compassion. When trials stretch long, memories often shorten. One forgets decades of health in the glare of a few years of sickness. Ayoub's conversation with his wife reminds hearts to weigh time differently, to place years of ease alongside years of hardship, and see that gratitude is still owed for the balance. The end of his story also offers reassurance to those who fear that their own anger or despair in moments of weakness has ruined them. Ayoub's wife faltered. Ayoub himself swore in anguish, yet Allah provided a way for that oath to be fulfilled without cruelty, and for their relationship to be healed. This hints that what matters is not never stumbling, but returning again and again to the path of trust and obedience. In the final measure, Ayoub stands as a sign that a human being can be stripped of almost everything and still remain rich in the only treasure that endures, a heart anchored in the knowledge of its Lord. His body lay wasted, but his faith walked tall. His wealth vanished, but his gratitude did not. His children returned to their Creator, but his love for that Creator deepened rather than diminished. For anyone listening in a hospital ward, in a house shadowed by loss, or in the quiet ache of unspoken trials, the story of Ayoub carries a gentle invitation. It does not deny pain, nor does it promise that every hardship in this life will be reversed as his was. Instead, it lifts the gaze beyond immediate circumstances toward the one who sees every tear and records every moment of patient endurance. There, in that higher gaze, another understanding takes root, that life's seasons, green and barren, loud with laughter and hollow with silence, are all chapters in a narrative written by the most wise. Ayoub's name lives on not because he never suffered, but because he transformed suffering into a bridge of nearness to his Lord. And so, when the winds of trial blow cold and long, his story whispers to every heart, endure as he endured, speak as he spoke, and trust as he trusted. For the Lord who returned his health and multiplied his blessings is the same Lord watching over every soul now, able at any moment to say, strike the earth, and bring forth from beneath your feet a spring you never imagined. For more stories that can help you relax, don't forget to like and subscribe.